Namaste, everyone. Welcome to this webinar that is titled Exploring India, that is Bharat. We have a special guest, Sai Deepakji, who will do all the introductions. But before we begin, let me quickly do a quick prayer. This is what we traditionally do with all our webinars that we start. So I'll just go. Om Swasti Prajabhyah Paripalyantam Nyayena Margena Mahim Mahishah Gobrahmanebhyam Shubhamastu Nityam Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Namaste. My name is Nishant Limbachi. I'm the National Convener of Indica USA. I have Avtans Kumar as well. He's a National Convener for the Indica USA. And we have Ram Sundar as well, but he's right now not here for personal reasons. And he's also one of our national coordinators. So with that, I'll just briefly introduce Indica and what we are. I'm sure most people already know about Indica or have heard about Indica. So we are a non-traditional university for traditional knowledge. We seek to build a global renaissance based on Indic civilization thought. So if you have been following social media, we have several initiatives. We have Indica courses that do like short-term courses on range of topics like Ayurveda or yoga or meditation. We have Indica Pictures, which is right now running a 4-day Indic film festival, which is free for everybody to see. So if you just go to indica.pictures, you'll be able to see all those Indic films that they are clean cinema, so to speak. And you can all enjoy it with your family. We do conferences, we do seminars, we do workshops, seminars and webinars like this. We also do conferences. So the two recent ones I can name was there was one on Buddhism, which was very, really great. And now I think polytheism is one that is being, there was last week and this week as well. So you can all check out us online, indicacademy.com or indica.org online. And without much ado, I'll pass it on to Avtans Bhai to introduce our speaker today, and we'll go from there. Over to you, Avtans Bhai.
Namaste, everybody. Namaste, Sai. Welcome to our webinar again. I will quickly do an introduction of Sai Deepak. Even though everybody knows him, he is a very well learned, very well known scholar. Sai Deepak has graduated from Anna University with bachelor's in mechanical engineering, after which he went on to pursue LLB from IIT Kharagpur. After completion of law, he joined Sri Krishna and Associates as an associate in 2009, where he has been promoted to an associate partner. Sai Deepak has been writing on constitutional matters on a variety of media outlets. He has been making presentations and seminars all over the country. And now he has also represented several cases in the Supreme Court of India. So one of them, very famous, the Sabrimala case. And so he's very well known, and I welcome him on our webinar. Welcome, Sai.
Namaste, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for the opportunity to interact with the patrons of Indica. Just one small correction. I'm no more with Sai Krishna and Associates. That was about 5.5 years ago. I currently practice as an independent arguing counsel before the Supreme Court and the Delhi High Court. That's just an important correction. That's it.
Sorry about that. With that, Shall we start now?
Yes, sir.
The first, all right. So since since this was the introductory section, and can you tell us about your journey from being an engineer to a constitutional scholar? I know you have been asked these questions, but it's still intrigues a lot of people.
So I will try to keep this question, which is capable of turning into an Atmastuti, as short as possible. All I can say is that I think at some point, like most people in my generation, and I don't think I'm particularly unique as far as this particular aspect is concerned, there was a certain degree of what I would call transgenerational civilizational angst. And I did not have perhaps the lexicon, the framework, or the means to articulate it, although there was a lot of anger and there was a lot of anxiety. Uh, uh, as I said, and I've clarified before, none of this stems from any kind of savior complex. It merely comes from perhaps a very selfish interest to preserve what is closest to you and what is dear to you, which is your way of life. And therefore, the idea was to find a way to bring whatever little skills I have or had to bear on this particular subject. And I was sure of one thing, that while I was decent and fairly good as an engineer, and I knew what I wanted to achieve in the engineering field, I wasn't sure if that was what destiny had in store for me. And I wanted to equip myself with at least one particular subject outside the engineering domain, which gave me the skill sets as well as what I would call a ringside view of how the system operated, in order for me to be able to contribute to it. Because as much as all of us like to take pot shots at the system, staying outside the system, the only way to change it is from within. And therefore, I wanted to understand how the system's architecture is built and what is it based on. Most people, at least engineers in India, have a tendency to look at civil services as an opportunity, as perhaps another area that they could branch out into. I wasn't sure of my ability to survive in the bureaucracy, given my fairly candid nature. So I felt that perhaps the legal fraternity gave me an opportunity to understand the system, to contribute to the system, and wherever necessary and possible, even challenge the system. And that's one of the reasons that I made the switch. But most importantly, I didn't want to quickly jump to constitutional law for multiple reasons. One of which was, of course, because I had certain personal responsibilities. And I wanted to first establish myself as a commercial litigator who understood how the law functions, because there's no point in being an activist in court. It's important to be a lawyer in court. And I don't see myself in the mold of an activist, and I will never be one. I'm a lawyer first, and I will clearly stick to only that particular role, because I see myself adding a lot of value, or at least whatever value I can, only through that particular department. So, not that I have anything against activists or activism. It's my clear decision that I'm not cut out for it, nor do I want to spend my time doing anything that is activisty. And therefore, the idea was to first establish my credentials as a lawyer's lawyer in the first place. And therefore, I spent the first 7 years proving myself in my areas of core competence, which are interestingly intellectual property law, civil commercial litigation, competition law, and technology law, so to speak, before I went independent in 2016. So until 2016, that is between 2009 to 2016, while I was part of a law firm, I had the opportunity to wet my beak in multiple areas, but also contribute heavily to my core specialties, which is intellectual property law. But along the way, I managed to work on quite a few constitutional matters of significance, but none of them had a civilizational bent. And on these issues, I think it's important to also understand that as much as you would like to present, let's say, a facade of objectivity, the fact is everybody has their own ideological proclivities and leanings. And I did not want the weight of my opinion to be borne by any other outfit. And therefore, I was fairly modest or even reticent in my opinions, as long as I was working for someone else. So I think the beast was unleashed after I went independent. So in 2016 is when I went independent. And that gave me the opportunity to speak freely. And I wouldn't say that I was restrained in any manner, because very few people have succeeded in restraining me. So I don't think I was restrained in any manner from expressing my opinions, even as part of the previous outfit. But I did not choose to express it as freely as possible, only out of a sense of responsibility, because you never know who bears the brunt of your opinions.
Yes.
And if at all you have an opinion, I think the primary responsibility falls on you to either take the rap on the knuckle for it or whatever else comes with it. And so once I went independent, it gave me the opportunity to flex my legal muscle in terms of other areas of practice. And that's when I decided to heavily pursue constitutional law as well. Fortunately, since I'd spent about 7 years in the profession, proving my stripes as a litigator, I was in a position to make the switch to practice exclusively as an arguing counsel, which crudely translates to a barrister style of practice, wherein you don't draft or file, but you're engaged by solicitors to argue for them. So that's been my mold of practice and my model of practice for the last 5.5 years, since June 2016. And therefore, apart from, let's say, contributing to my core specialties, over the years, I've also developed, I'd say, a bit of a reputation with respect to constitutional law. And I would never call it expertise, and I would certainly not call myself a constitutional scholar at this stage. I think I have at least another half a decade before I reach that particular stage, conservatively speaking. And therefore, at this stage, what I'm taking are baby steps, and hopefully strong baby steps in the right direction. So Destiny has been kind enough to place on my table quite a few lifetime opportunities, such as the Sabarimala case, as well as the Padmanabha Swami temple case, which, apart from pushing me towards constitutional law further, also exposed my utter ignorance with respect to Indic institutions. I realized I knew very little, that anger and emotion are certainly no substitutes for knowledge, is something that I realized. And therefore, I was put, by the grace of the gods, in plural, in the company of better informed people. And that pushed me into learning a lot more. And dare I say, I've learned a lot more, and I know that I have a lot more to learn at this point. And I regretted the lack of a traditional Vedic training. And I'm trying to compensate for it in the best of ways possible, given my hectic schedule and whatnot. And fortunately, the last few years, given the work that I have done and the visibility that it has given, more than anything else, I'm grateful for the kind of people that it has put me in touch with, because that has given me an opportunity to learn from the best of the best. And that, I think, has been the single biggest learning in this entire journey. Everything else, according to me, is just a sideshow. So giving me an opportunity to learn from others who really know what they're talking about, and helping me use whatever little presence I have to push that particular message as much as possible in the demographic that matters the most, which is the demographic of the future. I think that's where this journey has been so far. So let's see what happens.
Thank you. That was really a wonderful exposition of your journey so far. I wanted to quickly ask you, and you already touched upon it towards the end specifically. You are not just an outstanding lawyer, you also argue for dharma in the highest court of the land. Now, what makes you such a potent lawyer for dharma?
I think that's a trick question. I'll try and answer it slightly differently, as opposed to, I won't bite the bait here. So let me negate all the presumptions underlying that question, and I'll rephrase the question to my advantage, which is, how am I useful to dharma given my position as a lawyer? I will put it that way. I think the first thing that comes with legal training, at least the Anglo-Saxon legal training, is that you know the creature that you're dealing with. And I'm a fairly good student of this particular system. Unfortunately and fortunately, both at the same time. Okay. Unfortunately is a reflection of our situation as a civilization. Fortunately is because I know what I'm dealing with. And therefore, I understand this particular system, its weaknesses, its strengths, the real-time optic issues, and what kind of optics that it chooses to cater to, what is palatable to it. and how do I package the dharmic narrative within this particular structure? Because you see, until there is a revamp of the structure, this is the system I need to operate within.
Right.
Therefore, whether I like it or not, as opposed to constantly challenging the system, sometimes I will necessarily have to present our positions in conformity with the system. And if it works, it works. Because at the end of the day, I'm not particularly, let's say, choosy about the means, as long as it gets the job done. So long as it's constitutional and it is above board, I don't have a problem with it. So therefore, my strength, I think, comes from the fact that my experience as a trial lawyer, who has now moved to exclusively practicing as an arguing counsel, has given me a very clear practical insight into how do you build a case. What is it that you are expected to present before a court of law? Sometimes I think we have a tendency to rush to court without preparation and without taking the time that it deserves to put in place the building blocks of an argument. And to quote Mr. Fali Nariman from his book, Before Memory Fades, he said this in the context of defamation suits, which is that defamation suits are filed in haste and regretted at leisure. And that more or less has been the fate with quite a few petitions which push the dharmic cause. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm not saying I know better. I'm merely saying that as a lawyer and as someone who's practiced for about 12 years now, there is a certain degree of level-headedness which I'm forced to approach a case with. Notwithstanding my anger when it comes to some of these causes, the training effectively tells me, calm down. This is how the forum responds. This is the nature of the system. So find the best manner in which you can present this case before the system and put your best foot forward. Do not let your passion overcome and prevail over your reason and your sense of judgment as a professional. So that, I think, is what I have learned. And hopefully, at some stage, all these experiences will translate to some kind of policy suggestions, if and when destiny presents me with an opportunity to effect that particular change. So let's see what that happens. I mean, how that happens, and if at all that particular path is shown to me. So my contribution is that I am forced to read forensically, and I am expected to undertake research. And I know that this can't be a solo act. So I have the humility to surround myself with a good team of researchers. I'm blessed to have a very good team of researchers and colleagues who are on board as far as this particular vision is concerned, and who are willing to burn the midnight oil, whether it's the Bengal petition or whichever petition. Within 24 hours, this team cranks up the best of petitions, something that can withstand the scrutiny of the court under the most withering of circumstances. So that, I think, is my contribution so far. And second, I still can consider myself young, if not younger. And since I'm on the right side of the hill, so to speak, I've still not touched 40. I'm going at least half a decade away from 40. So therefore, I'm still in a position to understand what connects with this particular demographic. And this demographic, which is being nudged in the direction of wokeism, badly needs more and more people to interact and reach out to them and speak in a language that they understand, but convey the message that we want them to understand. So that, I think, has so far helped. And by nature, I hate attending the run-of-the-mill conferences. And if I'm given a choice between attending conferences and interacting with students, I will always choose the latter. So that, I think, has really helped.
So I've been reading your book. I haven't completed it. I'm probably 50% of done. And you talk about decoloniality a lot in the first half, at least first half of the book.
Right.
So I was thinking, like, which field do you think is the most decolonized in India? Let's say, I mean, in terms of, like, I was thinking about in terms of education, in terms of arts, in terms of one of the question here is engineering, like, you know, so what field do you think is the most, or in your opinion, I guess, is the most decolonized? Any guesses?
My lack of exposure in other fields limits the scope of my answer. but
Okay.
from my very limited knowledge, I think fortunately the classical arts remain still relatively untouched. And the Guru Shishya Parampara and the traditions that go with it have somehow managed to protect that particular field from the experience of, or let's say the influence of coloniality to a significant extent. But given the constant attempts to divorce our arts from their Indic origins and their dharmic origins, which are currently underway, I think we are slowly losing ground even on that front. And this was inevitable, according to me, because I think it's only a matter of time. That's all the more reason that this resistance of decoloniality is extremely important, because once it starts digesting arts, I think the last mile is effectively covered. Okay, because after that, I really don't know what is left and what remains. So it is unfortunate that perhaps that is the only realm that I can think of at this stage, because everything else has been completely captured by the influence of coloniality. Language, yes. History, yes. Education, yes. Dressing, yes. Food habits, yes. Lifestyle, yes. So I really don't know what is left.
That was pretty much my hunch, because you see a lot of effort going on from the other side to kind of capture the arts, and that is where you get your clue that they think that is the territory or that kshetra that is uncaptured by them, and they want to kind of go ahead and capture it. So it's a good one. Thank you. There are quite a few questions. There is one by Aditya Joshi. He says, we already know your position on Indian culture. However, I would like to know your view on other cultures. Do you think Indic culture is superior to other cultures? I have a slight disagreement with that, but I'll go ahead and let you answer that. I mean, for us, Indic culture is obviously superior for us. For other people, maybe their culture is superior to them. But if you want to answer that, Sai Deepak.
So there is a last part to the question which I think is critical, wherein he asks, is your position based on the inherent superiority of other cultures, or is it based on the belief that every civilization is best left to its own cultures and values? I don't see this as a disjunctive question. It can be a conjunctive question, which is to say that to me, my culture is superior, and I don't see the need to impose it on others is where I would stop. Okay. So let people decide what is good for them, and let every culture have its own journey. And that need not come in the way of me thinking that, at least as far as my society is concerned, my civilization and my culture is superior. The problem, I think, the underlying problem, and I hope I have not misread the question, is that we have a tendency to underplay our contributions. And therefore, today, we don't even want to say that, at least as far as my culture and my experience are concerned, we are the best. We don't even want to make that claim.
Yes.
Okay. It's almost as if we have a serious problem being number one. Okay. So I don't know how that works. I hope that's not the case. But in any case, I don't think the Indic civilizational renaissance is about asserting supremacism of our cultures.
Yes.
Because first of all, I think assuming that even if that's on the radar or it's on the wish list, I can't think of supremacism when my own house is on fire.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I have to put my house in order in the first place.
Yes, absolutely.
My culture doesn't seem to find a pride of place in its own home. So where is the question of me trying to assert it on everybody else? Okay. Right. So I think in terms of priorities, perhaps this question can be addressed maybe 25, 30 years later, not
now. There is a series of questions from Shivam Dubey. There is one on NCRT and the textbooks. We all know there is a lot of talk going on social media. I want to pick one question out of that, which is pretty relevant here. He says, India, that is Bharat का भारतीय भाषा में अनुवाद प्रस्तुत करने के विषय में आपका क्या विचार है?
Sorry, what was the question again?
India, that is Bharat को what to translate it in Indian languages?
तो मैं आपको ये जरूर बता सकता हूं कि इस पुस्तक का अनुवाद शुरू हो चुका है 6 भारतीय भाषाओं में, हिंदी, मराठी, दक्षिण के जितने भी सारे भाषाएं हैं, तमिल, तेलुगु, कन्नड़ा, मलयालम, इन सभी में इसका अनुवाद होगा। एंड दूसरी पुस्तक, ये जो ट्रिलॉजी है, जो त्रयी है, इसके दूसरी पुस्तक के साथ इन 6 अनुवादों का जो है रिलीज होने के चांसेस है। तो काम तो उसी दिशा में हो रहा है, देखते हैं कि कितना होता है और कितना हो नहीं पाता है, लेट अस सी, बट दिस इज वेरी वेरी क्लियर। इसके बाद बंगाली में भी इसके अनुवाद के बारे में बात शुरू हो चुकी है, लेकिन पहले इन 6 लैंग्वेजेस पे इसको रिलीज करना बहुत ही जरूरी है, तो ये पक्का जरूर होगा।
Or a quick side question on that. When are your other 2 of the remaining books of the trilogy are coming? इसके बाद वाली, do you have any specific dates or any just ballpark figures?
Yes, sir. So the thing is, I have effectively wound up the promotion for the first book. जो भी इसके लिए यात्रा हो रहा था वो हो चुका है, अभी इससे ज्यादा नहीं होगा। I just have one event in Mysore on the 27th of November, but other than that, everything else is done. And now I hope that the word of mouth, which has seen the book through so far, will carry it further.
Right.
And बाकी जो होगा, हर पुस्तक की like every other individual, उसकी एक नियति होती है, so I leave it at that. Okay.
Right.
इससे ज्यादा मैं इसको पुश करने की कोशिश नहीं करूंगा। So second book पे जो काम है वो शुरू हो चुका है, and hopefully by the grace of the gods, if all goes well, it should be out by June 2022.
Okay.
And the third book around the same period of 2023.
Okay.
Sai, it's Avtans again. Can you clarify for us? Seems to be a confusion that the Constitution of India has never been ratified in any Indian language. Is it true? And because of that, or maybe other reasons, it is not applicable. No other version of the Constitution of India other than English is applicable or admissible in the highest court of the land. Is that true?
During the course of our discussions, in fact, our research on Article 26, where the use of the words religious denomination exists, the Hindi translation speaks of sampradaya. And we wanted to present to the court the point of view that sampradaya strictly is not the same as a religious denomination, because religious denomination has a distinct Christian character to it, whereas sampradaya has a very dharmic character to it. So during the course of that, I think, if my memory serves me right, we ended up seeing that if there is a conflict between the Hindi version and the English version, apparently the interpretation of the English version prevails. Okay. Which is different from the position under Irish constitution. If there is an ambiguity and a conflict between the English interpretation of the Irish constitution and the Irish interpretation, apparently the Irish language prevails. Okay, but let me caveat this by saying that I hope to address this question in greater detail as part of the language discussion under the second book. So quite a few questions relating to the current constitution of 1950. I will be addressing it as part of the second book. So, which is why there's a decent chance I'm going to preempt a question, which is whether the constitution is colonial or not. I cannot answer that question until the second book is over, because that analysis is still underway. I just know that the beginnings of Indian constitutionalism are colonial, but whether the outcome is colonial or not is still a question. Is pe kaam jari hai, it's work in progress. So I want to keep an open mind until the second book is done before I can answer that question.
Okay, let me ask you a little different way. So we all know the Indian legal system, many call it dominated heavily by the Anglo-Saxon ideas of freedom, equality, liberty, right? But how does this reconcile with the idea of Bharat, which is dharma-based? Do you feel a disconnect or contradiction?
So the thing is, every document it acquires a life of its own in the hands of an individual. Okay. So a legal system is not as impersonal as we make it out to be, because at the end of the day, it is the human mind that chooses to interpret that particular document. And therefore, it depends on the quality of people that you produce and their own worldview as to उस कागज में इनको दिखता क्या है और उससे निकलता क्या है. Okay. So it is extremely important to understand that our education policies and our outcomes from the judiciary with respect to the constitution are directly connected. It's not even an indirect connection. It is directly connected. And it's a cycle. Your education policy influences the kind of people who are on that particular office, and which in turn affects the manner in which they look at the document. The manner in which they look at that particular document also has a bearing on the educational policy and the curriculum subsequently. This cycle goes on and on and on. Okay. Now, whether it is the document that is at loggerheads with the civilization, or the interpretation of the document which is at loggerheads with the civilization, is the precise question that I hope to address. Because you see, when you have had people like, and I've said this at least 6 or 7 times before in other talks, that when you've had people like Sri Madan Mohan Malviya, who set up the Banaras Hindu University, you've had Sri Rajagopalachari, you've had Sri Lokanath Mishra, all of whom were practicing dharmics and whose contributions to Hinduism cannot be negated under any circumstances. Can we come to the conclusion that a constitution which is the product of cogitations of all these people is necessarily an anti-Hindu document? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. Second, one of the reasons that we end up coming to this particular conclusion in a very abrupt way is because we end up imputing the Nehruvian tendency to the constitution. But Nehru started having a say primarily after 1950. So if that is the case, it is almost as if it's an ex post facto analysis of the document. So I want to understand. So that's exactly what I'm trying to do. That 1950 tak is document ka character kya tha? What is its nature? Okay. And what is it that it has been subjected to subsequently is the analysis of the third book. Okay. So first of all, let us try and understand the document on its own terms before we look at how it may have been, let's say, distorted under what I would call the third wave of destructive colonization, which is the Nehruvian Marxist colonization. Okay. So we speak of Christian colonization, we speak of Islamic colonization, but we don't speak of the Nehruvian Marxist colonization, because that, according to me, is the worst. It's not the Islamic colonization that is the worst. No, I'm sorry, because you responded to it. You are aware of the enemy, and he was an outsider. You have responded to some extent to Christian colonization, but the worst part about Christian colonization is that it has created an enemy within who continues to take that message forward. So this analysis of whether the civilizational standpoint or worldview is at loggerheads with the document is something that I seriously wish to address. Because if I were to come to the conclusion that it is not the document that is the problem, but the dispensation from 1950 which is the problem, then it is still possible to make a constitutional argument and an anti-Nehruvian argument, okay, without making an anti-constitutional argument, okay. So I'm certainly trying to find if there are ways to protect the constitution and understand if all of this has to be laid at the doors of Nehru. Because you see, if this were to be a colonial constitution fully, तो गो रक्षा की बात क्यों होती है उसमें? How is that even possible? You ask the Marxists and you ask their Islamist cohorts, they will tell you that this is a Hindu constitution according to them.
Yeah, right.
Because there are provisions which protect Sampradayic rights, which they have a serious problem with. And they also have a serious problem with provisions relating to cow slaughter. There are articles written by them in Indian academia where they clearly say that this constitution is the product of Savarna elitism. That is the language that they use.
Mm.
So imagine, unke nazariye se ye hai, and we are saying that this is anti-dharmic. Okay. There is a decent chance that they are right. Except that I have a problem with the characterization of it as a Savarna constitution. Okay.
Right.
I will call it a dharmic constitution in that sense. Okay. A hybrid constitution which tries to strike a balance between dharma and the realities of the Eurocentric world which we are currently living in. Okay, that could be the reason, or that could be how ultimately the constitution comes across. So this analysis, I will wait and I'll keep my answers open. And hopefully I should have it in the 5th section of the second book, because that's how I have divided the chapterization. So in the 5th section of the second book, this is what I hope to address.
Thank you.
All right. Let me take one more question. One of the questions is talking about S.N. Balgangadhar's book, if you've read that, and I think you've alluded that to in your book.
Yes.
The heathen in his blindness.
Yeah.
Let me go. There was one question that was interesting. Let me scroll down. We talk about Middle Eastern colonization.
Yes.
We have had two colonizations. I actually mentioned the third one, Nehruvian, colonized Marxist colonization. But the first two, which do you think is a harder one to dislodge, so to speak?
So the thing is, the Middle Eastern colonialism or coloniality as it operates today has found two beautiful ways. And I don't think even Christian coloniality is able to find a response to it. And I'll tell you how this works. Take Kerala as a live example, wherein the Marxists are unable to choose between their Christian constituency and their Muslim constituency. Okay? Coupled with the fact that the church has now come out strongly against the grooming jihad. Okay. So here an instance where I think the Middle Eastern coloniality is able to effectively exercise its street veto, and it is also able to exercise effectively its intellectual veto through the use of Marxism as its ally to push its point of view. Okay. So the left is the facade behind which the Middle Eastern coloniality hides. Okay. And look at the other two mentalities. The Hindu has no response either on the street or on the intellectual front yet, which is credible enough to respond.
Yeah.
It is just about starting. I think it is just about started, but it will take some time before we can give the same degree of response. And Christian coloniality, I don't think has been able to find a response to the street veto of the jihadi in that particular sense. So I think Middle Eastern coloniality is having the best of both worlds, not just in Bharat, but in the United States as well, and in Europe as well.
Right.
You know for a fact, being in the United States, that quite a few cities in the United States are now completely dominated by Middle Easterners, right? Where I don't think that even the police is able to handle it because they fear the allegation of racism.
Yes.
Okay. And when you do not take action for the fear of racism, effectively, a Christian template has been used to protect your interest. Okay. So a Western template is now playing into the hands of the jihadi mentality, and he knows how to protect his interest using that particular template and pushing it further and further. So he will guilt trip you and simultaneously attack you on the street. So mentally you have no response, and physically also you don't have a response. Okay. And therefore I think that as on date, notwithstanding the fact that the sun has still not set on the west, I see a very clear rise of Middle Eastern coloniality once more. Okay. And there I think the book written by, I think P.K. Ori, The Long March of Islam, I think is a fantastic book to read, because in one of his lectures, he made this bold statement that Islam is back and it is on the march.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's my answer.
Yeah. And just a quick plug. I mean, people here attending, they can also read Robert Spencer's book. I think there is something called Mass Migration in Europe or something, which is a fantastic piece of document that kind of illustrates, all the, incidents that has happened, what we see in today's Europe, So it's a good book to read as well.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Since Sai Deepak ji, we are having this conversation in the background of your book, India, that is Bharat. I think even though it's a much asked questions and people may have already heard a lot about it, can you briefly talk about the journey of this book? How did this come about?
So I think in the last Kshetrayanam conference that was organized by Indic Collective, People for Dharma and Upward together, I had the benefit of speaking on my experience in the Padmanabha Swami temple case. And I was drawing from the research which was put together for that particular case to make the argument that if over 500 Hindu princely states come together to form an Indian union, how do we come to the conclusion that this was a secular union? Okay. And especially when these Hindu princely states specifically negotiated for their religious rights and for rights over the temple, there are patron deities and their family deities, so to speak, because Sri Padmanabha Swami is effectively the family deity of the Travancore royal family. Just as Chamundeshwari Devi is the family deity of the Mysore royal family. Eklingji for the Mewad family. Similarly, you have for the Gajapati of Odisha, for whom Jagannath ji is the family deity. Similarly, in Kashi, you still have the royal family. And the Tanjavur Marathas still have several temples under their adhinam, under their control. Okay, Tanjavur Marathas, not even the Marathas living in Maharashtra. Okay, these are all the descendants of Sarfoji, Tukoji, and all these people. Okay, so with all this going on, how did we come to the conclusion that the Constitution of 1950 is effectively a secular constitution? So while I was making this argument, I thought that perhaps it makes for a good book and it requires deeper analysis. And I received an email from Dr. Prakash Shah, who watched that lecture, and he said, this seems like a very good topic to research on. For most people who don't know, Dr. Prakash C. Shah is a professor at Queensberry University, London, and he teaches law, culture, and society. He's one of the reviewers of my book, and who's been fairly critical in both ways of the book, and I've benefited from his inputs. So he made the suggestion that perhaps I should put together a team of scholars and researchers to start thinking on these lines. Independent of that, what happened was the CA riots took place. Then you had the response to Article 370, then the response to the Ram Janam Bhoomi judgment and all that. And gradually I felt that it was serious time for me to address the question of the relationship between the constitution and civilization. I think on the 14th of April 2020, when the lockdown was in full swing, two individuals, Dr. Indu Vishwanathan and Parth Parihar, Hindu American scholars, reached out to me to conduct a webinar on the Constitution for the benefit of Hindu Americans. And post that particular webinar, Dr. Vishwanathan seriously urged me to read up the literature on decoloniality. And she said the work that you do effectively falls within the scope of decoloniality. And I think you will benefit from the scholarship and the literature on the subject. So please read it. And she sent the literature as well. Thanks to her exhortations, I read up and I felt that there was a clear handshake between the literature on decoloniality produced by Latin American scholars and the formulations of Dr. S. N. Balagangadhara and Jacob D. Ruber. I'm not saying there's an identical match. I'm simply saying there is a significant degree of similarity. And therefore, I felt that this gave me the lens that I needed to look at the Constitution. But since I've never written a book, or at least I had never written a book then, I wasn't sure if I had what it took to write a book. So I thought of this as an intellectual marathon, and you start preparing for a marathon by running in spurts. So I started putting out articles of 1,000 to 2,000 words each on a regular basis. There was a column called Indic Views, where I've written about 45 to 60 pieces every Friday I used to write. And I used it as the testing ground to test the reception of the audience to these ideas. Interestingly, senior advocates from the left and the right and center from the Supreme Court reached out and said it's a very fresh and invigorating look at the Constitution. So please continue doing this. And therefore, I felt that I had enough material to start writing. So I think October 12th, 2020 is when I started writing the book. And by the grace of the gods, I finished the manuscript on Ram Navami of 2021, 21st of April, 2021. So 6 months and 8 days is what it took me to put this book together.
So one of my colleague Ram actually sent me a question for you. So he says, do you have aspirations to become a politician? And let me continue forward. and Ram says, I'm paraphrasing, I'm asking this question because of your answer to a similar question by S. Vijay Kumar of India Pride Project in your celebrated debate with Dr. Shashi Tharoor in Chennai a few weeks ago. So would you care to answer, Sai Deepakji?
I think I was just being tongue in cheek. I know exactly what he meant. I said I'm not an elected representative yet, and therefore people are focused on the yet. Okay. The thing is, I am not cut out for politics. I don't have the brains for it, nor do I have the interest for it. And I certainly don't have, let's say, the patience for it. And while I think it's our favorite pastime to bash politicians, it's an extremely difficult job. It's an extremely difficult life. That's a fact. Okay. And I think there are other ways to contribute to the system, but electoral politics is certainly not my cup of tea. Namaste.
So I have a interesting question from Shubhankar Tiwari. He says, apart from the issues which you've often spoken about, what more issues would you like to see become part of a discourse in future, specifically related to Indic Renaissance? And hopefully that will help even more youngsters galvanize to become decolonized, so to speak.
I'm sorry, I'm unable to understand the sense of the question. Could you please help me understand?
Yes. So apart from the issues which you have already spoken about, or we've been speaking about, temple freedom and all that, what other issues would you like to become part of a public discourse, so to speak, in future that are related to Indic Renaissance?
Okay, I get what you're saying. So the thing is, in my limited analysis, I've identified temple freedom as one of the central objectives because it has the ability to address quite a few questions.
Right.
Because one of the things that I notice whenever I discuss temples is that caste inevitably becomes a part of that particular discussion.
Right.
And therefore, it is my considered belief, and I've said this before, that the question of temple freedom will also address the question of jati, varna, and kula. And I don't want to use the word caste. Okay. So I believe that perhaps this particular discussion in itself has the tendency and has the capacity to address quite a few issues relating to the Bharatiya civilization. And so I don't wish to spread myself too thin. I'm happy to take up other causes on a project-to-project basis, depending on my hardcore professional commitments. But this particular project itself takes about 20% of my professional time, and which I do pro bono with a huge team. And when I say I do, this is not a lone act. I'm just part of a team. There are quite a few people who are doing this in different courts. It just so happens that fortunately or unfortunately, what I do gets coverage, and therefore I become the face of it, but that's not the reason. There are a lot of people working on the ground. Several other lawyers are working in different parts of the country. And therefore, given the expanse of the problem, the magnitude of the issue, I think this itself is fairly time consuming. So I'm not someone who likes to be a part of everything for the sake of visibility. I take up one cause, I try to give it my best, and hopefully achieve the goals that we cut out for ourselves as far as this particular cause is concerned. This will itself will create a lot of spin-offs. Okay, so I'll wait for that to happen. As of now, this is the goal. As and when there are multiple petitions. So for instance, I think at some stage, there was the Sudarshan News Channel petition before the Supreme Court, which I was asked to become a part of by a couple of interveners. So I acted there as well. I appeared there as well. Then with respect to illegal migration, we were among the earliest interveners asking the court to deport Rohingyas to the Supreme Court. We did this in 2016, or rather in 2017.
Right.
So for me, there are three big picture issues that I would seriously consider, and I'm happy to be a part of it anywhere in the country. Temple freedom, illegal migration, conversion. These are the only three issues which I think I must address at this stage. Okay. As long as these priorities are addressed, I think both internal issues and external challenges can be significantly addressed. So these are my priorities.
I have a question that is being posed here by Panch Pakeshan Iyer.
Ji.
He says, hello, Saidipak ji. I see that most people from the young generation are moving abroad for pursuing their future career. This is a bit of a personal question. I would like to know what motivated you to stay in India to pursue your field, and what would be your message to the youth regarding taking a decision like that?
So, honestly, I believe that Bharat is the place to be. And I seriously don't mean disrespect to any of you living in the United States. Okay. My own brother lives in California, my younger brother. So I say this because you see, when a civilization reawakens, I think that's the most exciting phase or journey to be a part of.
Yes.
And Bharat has awakened from its deep slumber. I believe that it is underway. And when we look at history textbooks, we ask ourselves, what is it that we could have done had we been part of the medieval ages? Okay, when the civilization was under attack. Okay, or during the Christian colonization of Bharat. Well, now history has presented you with an opportunity to answer that question,
right,
in every possible way. So I would never leave this Punya Bhumi under any circumstances for anything else, simply because I think this is where let's say my course of action lies. And for the other people who are looking at greener pastures abroad, I'd say, do you want to be a spectator from the sidelines when you can contribute to the game itself?
Mm-hmm.
Ask that question.
Right.
Second, from a standpoint of professional growth also, I will say this from my fraternity and my industry. I can't speak for any other industry because the landscape of every industry is different. If you go to other jurisdictions, to a significant extent on quite a few subjects, the law is decided. Okay. Bharat, as an emerging economy, the law is still yet to be settled. Okay. Its interpretation is still open. So as a lawyer, I have an opportunity to be a part of a historic lawmaking process, not just with respect to the constitution, but from a commercial standpoint, whenever you look at competition law, intellectual property law, whatever it may be, because when the economy booms and the country is hungry for wealth creation, law is expected to keep pace with it.
Yes.
Right? So as a lawyer who made a conscious switch, I stand to benefit as part of this particular growth.
Right.
So I don't wish to make this grand statement, oh, I'm here to save dharma, that's why I'm here. No, not at all. Dharma as well as artha, both are reasons enough for me to stay in this country.
Right.
Okay. And I would urge others to treat Bharat as their karma bhumi, because this is the way of the future. The East is the way of the future. That much I'm very clear about.
Right.
Okay. So you have to decide whether you wish to be a spectator on the sidelines or do you wish to contribute to this historic process. This is a fantastic time window for the civilization. And I think if at all there is a greener pasture, this is the green pasture. All
Right.
sorts of issues, because I think chaos, let's say, births opportunity. And Bharat is going through a creative chaos at this point.
Creative, yes.
And I'd like to be a part of this.
Wonderful.
Yeah, just a quick anecdote. I mean, when we moved here, I'm personally talking about myself. It was 20 years ago, and then obviously that time the pasture was greener on this side. But but we are still connected in a way. We still talk about India as we can see right now, and we see that there is a consciousness emerging, and we want to be actively be part of that, and that is why we do all this, staying away from the.
My answer by saying that
yes,
Bharat also needs an extremely well-placed diaspora. I'm alive to that.
Yes.
So the diaspora has its value, extremely significant value, especially when it comes to foreign policy. And I think the Bharatiya diaspora has done a scintillating job of defending its interests over the years, especially in crunch times. So I will never. So the point is, diaspora must be created out of choice, but not out of force.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Unfortunately, you did not go there by choice. Because you did not have choices in this country under the Nehruvian dispensation, you were forced to leave this country for greener pastures.
Yes.
So if at all there is diaspora, it must be there to push our strategic interests, but not because of lack of opportunities in this country, right?
Yes.
So the
Absolutely.
existence of a huge diaspora in the rest of the world is not a testament to our greatness, but in fact is a testament to the failure of Nehruvian civilization. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I don't think it is right on anybody's part to blame others for leaving this country. Well, they've gone there. They have dispelled misconceptions about this being a land of snake charmers.
Right.
They've also dispelled the notion that science is the exclusive preserve of a certain race. They've also dispelled the notion that merely because they have moved away from this country, they have severed their relationships with this country. They continue to bat for this country, and I've seen that personally as well. So I don't think this kind of a binary certainly helps. So I'm completely with you on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And to quickly, add, I have children of my own, so we are battling with the same kind of coloniality that is in Indian textbooks. That is also it's pretty much on steroids here. So
well, after all, that's the Gangotri of this book, isn't it?
Right.
Okay, one more quick question about back to you, Sai Deepak. You are such a dynamic young person, busy all the time, doing a lot of work. How do you spend your quiet time with yourself? What do you do?
I really don't have one. So the only thing that I think I keep myself busy with is doing something different. But of course, I'm a huge movie buff. And I'm a product of undivided Andhra Pradesh. So all the Puranika movies of 50s and 60s, I literally binge on. I am the vintage N.T. Ramarao fan, okay, who loves all his Puranika movies. So whenever I think of Sri Krishna, I think of N.T. Ramarao, okay. Just as when you think of Sri Ram, you think of Arun Govil, you end up thinking of N.T. Ramarao when you think of Sri Krishna. And I love, so fortunately, thanks to better informed people, I love listening to Harikatha expositions of Srimati Vishakha Hari. She's great, including even Dushyant Sridhar for that matter. So I think the best thing that could have happened to my generation, which I wish the previous generation had, was the internet and YouTube. Okay. As much as it has a lot of garbage to offer, it also has a lot of good to offer. And this explosion of information we have all benefited from because it translates to even democratization of opinion and influences opinion making. So I love watching all of that. And the good part is quite a few people end up sending me some very interesting old books to read. Either translations of the works of Mahaperiva, which I have for Sri Chandrasekharan Saraswati of Kanchimat. So over the last 5 years, the kind of eclectic people that I've had the opportunity to meet have exposed me to such fantastic literature that my quiet time is either books or movies. I really go crazy about them.
Such wonderful conversation, and we are certainly losing track of time. So just to come back to the time aspect of it, we are almost about an hour time. So we have another 10-15 minutes and we'll take a couple more questions. Yeah. But before I turn it over to Nishan Pai, I see a question that I would like to pose here on the chat box. That's by Prabharani. She says, who is part of the civilization that we want to preserve? Aren't Christians and Muslims part of this civilization? How should about 25% of the population of this country feel part of it?
Well, I don't think there is an exclusivist agenda here. And if the insinuation is that the Bharatiya identity comes at the expense of the existence of minorities, then I think the questioner itself is pushing that idea forward, that the identities of Muslims and Christians are somehow at loggerheads with the identity of Bharat. Okay. But I certainly don't believe in Sarvadharma Sambhav and all that. I'm being very, very clear about this. I do not share that value under any circumstances. I'm not a believer of that. I believe that this land has an identity, and this identity is dharmic in nature. And there is no reason for Bharat to give up its dharmic identity only to accommodate other identities. I believe that Bharat has the ability to preserve its own and also accommodate others, so long as the others don't wish to sever our existence and our roots with our land, period. So, for the message to other communities, if at all there is one, is that please give up those ideas and let's say mindsets which endanger your coexistence with the majority and the native people of this land and the native thought process of this land. If Indonesian Muslims can find a way to celebrate Saraswati and Ganesha, well, I don't see what problem others could have. And second, I don't think we have ever insisted on anybody giving up their identities or their adopted identities.
Right.
But if that comes at the expense of creating fratricide, well, I think then history has its own way of finding response mechanisms. So I am very clear about the fact that none of this is meant to marginalize religious minorities, but to basically say that please understand that your identities themselves are the product of colonial expansionism. These are not your native identities. But if you want to hold on to them, please do so without endangering our existence and our identities, period. And I've said so as much in the book.
There's this one question from Sriram Sujit that I would like to pose to you. Can the Places of Worship Act 1991 be challenged in any shape or form? Yeah, I mean, you may, if you want to answer that.
Can you just repeat the question, sir? What was that?
Sure. It says Places of Worship Act of 1991. Can it be challenged in any shape or form?
Yeah, it's already been challenged. So Sri Ashwini Upadhyay has already filed a petition. And from what I understand, there are more petitions in line challenging the legislation.
There is one question Ram posed again. It says, any travel plans to USA for next book or in future?
So I was hoping to travel to the US around this period. In fact, this month is when I was hoping to come at least to the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
But the book promotion spilled over, and then I had to start the second book. Plus, I have my practice commitments and all that. Right. So June happens to be the summer vacation for lawyers in India. So hopefully, if my book is done by then and it's out, I should be able to make it to both sides of the Atlantic by then. So let's see what happens.
Well, don't forget the middle of Atlantic, ours in Chicago here. Please do visit us. We will be more than delighted to host you here.
Thank you for the invitation.
There are a lot of questions. Some of people are asking, most of the questions are related to whatever you've done or said in the past, and I would like to keep the conversation more towards book and some of the legal questions that have come up. So with all the other people that are asking questions, please, Kshama Prarthim. I cannot take everyone. There are so many questions. So let me see. There's one more. We could probably take one more question.
While Nishant Bhai is looking at some of the questions, Sai Deepak, I want to say that none of us here sitting here are constitutional experts. We are just, so if there are any shortcomings in our questions, please forgive us. And hopefully it did not insult your intellect
No, not at all. Not at all. Please.
or your expertise.
No, not at all.
I think there are other questions which relate to air pollution and all that, and we all know there is a a whole discourse going on that. And I would just add a comment. I mean, all this Diwali being targeted. You see, my personal opinion is it is because us Hindus are waking up to and getting decolonized, and so the response on the other side is getting fiercer because they notice it. So. Would you agree with that side, Deepakji?
So I think the fact that they have lost the political mandate makes them even more vicious.
Right.
Okay. And so therefore, the only places that are left are the unelected places, meaning, let's say, constitutional fora. I don't wish to go beyond that. Then the academic departments, media, pop culture, and activism. So the public interest litigation cottage industry. Okay. So these are the places which will now be employed fiercely to go after you, because their point is, if we come back to power, we will let you die a slow death. But if you're out of power, we'll quickly finish you. That's exactly what is being told. So either ways, you're staring at death, and it's a question of the time period. A civilizational extinction is what you're looking at. So I think, as they say, that the night is the darkest before dawn. So please, I think they should come out with all their fangs drawn and everything.
Yeah.
So that all of us see their Vishwaroop and Rudraroop. Okay. And are roused from our slumber to respond properly in a manner that they understand, in a language that they relate to.
Right. There are quite a few engineers who are asking about how can we help with the dharmic cause, and then after that there will be one more question I'll take. So if you want to take that one quickly, Sai Deepakji, many of says that there are many engineers here. How can we help the dharmic cause?
I've been asked this question by quite a few people during the course of the book tour and several lectures. All I'd say is, instead of trying to think macro, please start with the micro, which is improve your felicity and proficiency in your own native tongues first.
Yes.
Second, make sure that the values that you wish to propound and propagate to the rest of the society are first of all practiced in your home, in your families. Mm-hmm. Because we are the ones producing woke idiots. Yeah. Okay. So let us reduce the number of woke idiots that our families are producing.
Yes.
Okay. It seems as if the Hindu community is fertile with woke idiots.
Yes.
Okay. It's rife with such people. And for a civilization that has suffered massive waves of colonization, we should be the last ones to be producing woke idiots. Okay. It must be the colonizer society that should produce woke idiots out of guilt. We don't need to suffer from guilt.
Yes.
Okay. If at all, others should be held guilty for what they've done to us.
Yes.
3, I think it's important that all of us take an active interest, at the very least, in our own temples, which belong to our Kuladevatas.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you visit the temple at least once a year. Take an interest in the administration of that particular temple. Ensure that the Purohit of the temple is well fed and taken care of. Mm-hmm. And ensure that the next generation of that temple exists.
Yes.
If all of us take ownership of at least our own temples, at the very least, I think we are doing our basic Swadharma.
Right.
Okay. Instead of constantly thinking of what can I do for Tirupati Balaji, what can I do for Jagannath Puri, it was a baat ki baat hai. You first focus on your own Kuldevtas.
Yeah. Okay? Absolutely correct.
Because there will always be people to take care of the big temples. What about the small ones?
No, small. Yes.
So, if at all, I mean, people constantly say, Modi ji ye karte hain, Modi ji wo karte hain. Bhai, Modi ji starts small and he implements it. Right? He's very clear that he wants to address the macro through the micro. Right? These are the micros which are within our control.
Right.
Where you don't necessarily need to form trusts and organizations to do all of this. So start with that first. Mm-hmm. उसके बाद अगर जान बच जाती है, then we'll talk of the rest of the issues.
Right. Absolutely. So, and I think you've answered this question again. So, Yagna Sai Srivastav, I'm just reading out the question, but I think you've already answered it. So, whether do we rely on politicians and political parties on reawakening of Indic civilization? So, this is again, you just answered it, I think, partly.
Politics and politicians are only madhyam, are instrumentalities.
Right.
Therefore, the awakening must start at the level of the society. Politicians and politics must be used to deliver the goods and to formulate policies which you prepare. So please don't outsource the job of civilizational awakening to the state or to politicians. Ye kabhi nahi hoga, because it is fundamentally inefficient and ineffective. So you've prepared everything and give them a digested piece of material to implement. Don't expect them to do everything. वो नहीं होगा. Okay, and I don't blame any dispensation for this. I'm merely saying this is the nature of the modern state. Okay, because it is held hostage by multiple interests, whichever country it may be, whatever the dispensation may be. Therefore, the society must evolve mechanisms to prepare the civilizational blueprint and use politics to implement that blueprint. Only that's all. You don't need to delegate everything else. Retain power and autonomy over civilization, culture, and language, so that, see, you have to think on these lines. There must be a certain degree of civilizational continuity regardless of change in power and politics.
Right. Right.
That's not possible if you outsource everything to the state.
Yes.
Okay. So I operate with a certain degree of justified cynicism and circumspection with respect to the modern state, at least the modern Indian state. Okay. Because it has not been pro-Hindu, it has been positively anti-Hindu.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So until the state proves its bona fides to me, I have no reason to trust it. Okay.
Right.
The onus is on the state to prove itself, not the society. So let us preserve our autonomy. The problem is the Congress mentality of creating a Maibach mentality has translated to the civilizational space also. So we constantly look up to the state for solutions. The state is an implementer of solution. The solution comes from the society, period.
I think we are pretty much right about the time of ending. I know there are so many questions. People are asking me why aren't you taking my questions, but again, I'm Kshama Prarthi. Not every question can be taken. We have tried to do a conversation in a way that most of your answers are either answered in 1 or 2 lines, or given a longer answer. So please, with this, I think we are pretty much coming to the end of the program. Sai Deepak ji, thank you very much for giving us the time and giving us, showing some patience with our constant emails back and forth. So I'm very thankful for you attending, and I'm thankful for all the participants who have attended. Thankful to Srinivas ji from Indica who's arranged this live webinar and link. So with that, Sai Deepak ji, thank you very much again. Dhanyawad for coming on, and we shall do some similar events in the future. I hope so.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you all the participants. Dhanyawad. Namaskar.